So as we all remember, Jenna Ortega a few weeks ago talked about how she doesn't like the way they write modern female characters, and she actually called them two-dimensional and boring.
A project, you want to feel like the characters are representatives that you're seeing of yourself on screen are relatable or attainable. And sometimes when you're constantly walking and there's cars blowing up in the background and things like that, it's cool and it's awesome. It looks beautiful, but I don't know anything about her. So it's hard to develop some sort of admiration or connection with women when they're written very two-dimensional and don't really give you enough.
To be a strong woman, you have to be this.
And very soon after Jenna Ortega said that, we got news about this dumpster fire of a movie coming from Disney called Snow White. And they announced that they had changed the story of Snow White to fit modern audiences and had given it a modern edge. And Rachel Zegler talked about how they changed the character of Snow White to be basically everything that Jenna Ortega said she hates when it comes to modern female characters.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937. She's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
And so according to Rachel Zegler, they've made Snow White strong, assertive, and a great leader. And I don't want to jump to any sort of conclusion here, but Disney's track record as of late when making modern female leader type characters hasn't been very good. I mean, just look at Rey Skywalker's story arc in Star Wars, then go and look at Indiana Jones with the way they use Phoebe Waller-Bridge. When they try and create a good, strong female leader character, the characters fall flat and are honestly just absolutely boring and really come across as egotistical and so insufferable. And these are the exact character types that Jenna Ortega was absolutely trashing in her Actors on Actors talk with Elle Fanning. And so in this video, I want to use Jenna Ortega's points to showcase how bad this Snow White character is going to be if Rachel Zegler is right about all the changes that they've made, because Jenna Ortega made some great points which absolutely slam these Snow White type characters and many modern Disney films. And the first point that she makes is that these characters aren't relatable.
But I don't know anything about her. So it's hard to develop some sort of admiration or connection.
And to me, that's such a big problem when it comes to these modern female characters and when it comes to what they're about to do to Snow White. The characters aren't relatable because they don't come across as someone that we know. We don't know who these characters are. We've never met anyone like these types of characters because they're so sure of themselves. They make no mistakes. They suffer no setbacks. They're born absolutely perfect and they know everything. And the only problem in these types of characters' lives are everyone around them and not themselves, and so no one can relate to that because no one is perfect, and it just makes for a boring character, which by proxy makes a boring movie. And to me, it also sends a lot of unhealthy messages, especially to young women who look at these characters and are told time and time again that this is the role model female character, that this is someone they should aspire to be, the way many young men aspired to be someone like Sylvester Stallone in Rocky, or aspired to be someone like Mark Hamill in Star Wars. They try and pitch these Disney female leader type characters to young women and tell them that this is a good role model for them. And it sends an unhealthy message because, one, it tells them they don't have to work, because so many of these characters go the whole storyline, multiple films, and suffer no personal setbacks. They have no personal failures. The only thing that goes wrong in their life are other people around them. The only thing holding them back are the other people around them. They don't need to learn from others. They don't need to train. They don't need to grow and get better. They don't need to put in any work whatsoever because they're born completely perfect, and that just doesn't make sense. That's not a good message for life, and you're telling many young women and many young kids in general that they don't have to work in life, and that they don't have to challenge themselves, that they don't have any flaws that they need to overcome, and all that does is create a bunch of egotistical, narcissistic young people, because these people feel like everyone everyone else must bend to their will and that everyone else must make sacrifices for them so that they don't have to make sacrifices because they're absolutely perfect and everyone should just accept them for exactly who they are. And to me, that's such a bad message because yes, we should accept you for your build or your race or your gender. That doesn't play a part. But what we shouldn't accept is if you have any flaws that you need to overcome to better suit the job you're doing, or you have some flaws you need to overcome to be a better friend or to be a better person in life in general or just to improve. Yet with these modern female leader type characters, they don't send any of that within the message. They try and push that you're perfect just the way you are, and to me that's causing way more harm than good. And the second problem when it comes to these unrelatable characters, as Jenna Ortega called them, is that they're not an attainable role model for what a woman is, because they pitch this type of woman who's just perfect at everything, and no woman can live up to that. And I'm sure it damages some people's mental health when they see what Disney and what many other media outlets are telling them a good woman is or a strong woman is, and they say to themselves, well, that's not me. I'm not 100% sure of myself. I'm human. I make mistakes. I have flaws. They don't feel that they're good enough, and it actually causes more harm because it puts them down and makes them feel as though they're not a real woman or that they're not a strong woman.
A few weeks back, you might remember Disney's new Snow White hit. The headlines for getting rid of 7 dwarfs and replacing them with average-sized magical creatures. Piers and his guest at the time weren't happy.
Behind-the-scenes pictures from Disney's live-action remake of Snow White were leaked this weekend, and there appears to be a sizable problem. Where are the dwarfs?
These are roles made for actors of my stature. I can't go out for the Harrison Ford or the George Clooney roles because that's not for me.
Right.
And now it's taken away. I don't feel that's right.
Well, now that very same production has caused controversy after the actress who plays Snow White said this about Prince Charming. In an interview, Rachel Ziegler saying the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There is a big focus on her love story with a guy literally stalking her. How weird. Well, we have a different approach to what a lot of people will assume is a love story because we cast a guy in the movie, but it's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. Well, there has been inevitable backlash online, fans accusing Disney of inserting unnecessary feminism into classic fairy tales. Joining me now to debate this is the host of Tomi Lahren is Fearless on Outkick, Tomi Lahren. Hi, Tomi. And from New York, the brand marketing and consumer expert and founder and chief soothsayer from Sooth, Ian Bear. Once again, great to see you both. Tomi, come on, give us your take on this. Disney just messing with the classics?
Yeah, they certainly are. Now listen, if Disney wants to make more woke films that tank at the box office, they are more than welcome to do that, but maybe think of an original idea. Maybe not destroy a classic from my childhood and put an actress in there that not only hates the plot and the storyline of the movie she's in, but also seemingly hates Snow White, the character herself. I mean, that's one interview clip that you read the quote from, but she's gone on to talk about this film numerous times, how she once thought Snow White was creepy, she doesn't like the prince, she thinks she should get paid more because she has to wear that dress, she should get paid for streaming for every hour she has to wear the dress. I mean, talk about biting the hand that feeds you. Not only are you being casted in a classic film to remake it, but you don't seemingly like your own character. So she comes off as an insufferable, whiny brat, and that's why people are so annoyed. Beyond just them inserting feminism, I think we expect that at this point, but why do you have to mess with a classic, especially with someone who doesn't even seem to like her own character?
Okay, interesting. I hear your take on her and the interview she's giving and the type of sort of the way she's coming across. But you say that you're kind of used to feminism being inserted into Disney movies now. Ian, it's a smart marketing move, isn't it?
Well, any move's a smart marketing move if it resonates with the people who are putting revenue against your product. Look, the reality is Disney has been doing very inclusive casting for decades now. Go back to the 1980s, and that's really when they turned the corner, and that formula of damsels in distress got replaced with these more heroic feminine characters, beginning with Ariel back then, but certainly all the Disney princesses ever since have really been triumphant females. So it's not a shock to see Disney pivot from 19th century German source material
Right.
to something that they believe is going to resonate with the audience. Of course, people will vote with their wallets.
Right. Tommy, 19th century German source material. Can you really blame Disney for wanting to court a modern audience? Gen Z and younger, these girls, they think differently, they act differently, they have different aspirations in life.
Yeah, it's okay to modernize things, but if you have such an issue with the original fairy tale and the original storyline, maybe instead of remaking it, you just make a different movie. I don't think that's too much to ask for. But furthermore, listen, you can have female characters that are empowered, that do great things, that are heroines. I mean, that's fantastic. I don't think anybody has an issue with it. But you don't have to disparage men in the process. You don't have to call Prince Charming a stalker. You don't have to say that you could just eliminate him from the whole movie. I mean, there is a space where you can have strong females and strong males. It's called the real world, or at least some places it still exists, maybe only here in Nashville, Tennessee, and others. But it's okay to do both, and you don't have to make men seem emasculated and puny to make women seem strong, and you don't have to eliminate them altogether, as this actress has actually suggested.
Well, okay, Ian, what about the controversy that this film has received online? It's clearly not coming from the young women it's marketed at. In fact, it seems to be coming from a male demographic.
Well, yeah. Well, I think it's interesting that there's been so much backlash where this is concerned, yet not really the same kind of backlash around the Barbie movie, which has certainly taken a different point of view. Most people who grew up with Barbie dolls, when you opened that package, it didn't immediately start speaking out against the patriarchy, right? Yet the Barbie movie we see today takes quite a feminist stance and a more inclusive stance than we've generally seen associated with the character. So, this is Disney's intellectual property. They can do what they want with it. People are going to choose to spend their money on it or not. It's not really a matter of moral judgment. Entertainment and art is created to be received and appreciated by an audience. And this is commercial art. This isn't to hang in a museum. It's going to succeed or fail on that merit.
And the Barbie movie you brought up, of course, a really fast-grossing billion-dollar movie for a female director, beating all expectations and all that controversy. Tommy, I want to come back to you because you made a really good point there about strong men and strong women. Why do you have to crush one to have the other? And I was thinking about the James Bond franchise. There's often this mooted idea that women will suddenly be stepping in to play Bond. We've obviously got a lot of female characters in that now. Do you think that's been to James Bond's detriment, or do you think it's been a success the way they've modernized that?
I think that the numbers will speak for themselves on that. And again, when you have a franchise that you have created around a James Bond character who is a strong male character, you don't need to go and then replace James Bond with a female. You can have other strong females. But what is this process now where it's like, in order to be inclusive, you have to completely destroy storylines, completely destroy franchises? I don't believe in that. I don't think that consumers believe in that either. There is a way to modernize things. There's a way to bring in inclusivity and diversity, but you don't have to completely destroy the concept in order to do that. And that's why, going back to the Barbie movie, I didn't have an issue with the Barbie movie because it's what I expected, right? I've always looked at Barbie as a female empowerment tool. I thought it was a women by women for women. Didn't see an issue with it. It's when they go and they try to monkey with other things where it doesn't belong that it just comes off as disingenuous. And the consumer, I don't think they're going to buy it. I don't think they're going to watch it. I don't think they're going to like it.
No, they certainly watch
feel like 2015 was the beginning of the end for us. The beginning of the end of good entertainment, the beginning of the end of stories being front and center in all movies produced and released, the beginning of the end of likable female characters, the beginning of the end of masculine men, and just the beginning of the end of sanity in general. It was hard to see at first. Most movies weren't making waves in the culture war like they are right now, and were staying under the radar with their marketing campaigns. For the most part, people kept their mouths shut about their agendas, and the audience went along with the strange new changes that, while not really making sense, seemed harmless in the long run. Boy, were we wrong. But in order to discuss just how bad things have gotten, we need to take a quick look at just how good things were. Modern Hollywood and its feminist cohorts seem to have forgotten that women have been integral parts of movies for decades. They have inhabited major roles, been women of power, and somehow, despite all of that, have possessed the ability to love and protect others, sometimes at great personal cost to themselves. They felt fear and sadness, pain and sorrow, joy and rage in equal measure, and despite being faced with horrific odds, managed to retain their humanity and a strict moral code even when things around them seemed hopeless. They never gave up, never stopped fighting, and were pretty awesome doing it. One of my favorite female characters that demonstrated this was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I was obsessed with her and her Slayer abilities. Coupled with the fact that she was also trying to be a regular high school girl, it made for a great story that was full of love, heartache, teenage angst, and a lot of silliness. I particularly loved her relationship with Angel. I don't know when exactly the turning point was, when the deep dive into ideological pandering and man-hating and female entitlement came from, but somewhere between 2017 and 2019 is when the alarms first began to sound. There are a few specific ways in which feminism has ruined Hollywood, and if I were to talk about them all in one video, it would be hours long. So I have decided to split them into a series. This first video will focus primarily on the writing and characterization of certain individuals, before moving on to the actresses themselves that have perpetuated this cycle of creative bankruptcy and character assassinations, and then the politics that have allowed this to be so. Everything is a hierarchy, it would seem, and today we're starting from the bottom and working our way to the top. The Last Jedi is a good example. A movie that is so polarizing to fans that to this day some people still deny its existence and call it fan fiction. That movie was a bit more subtle in the female entitlement department, Admiral Holdo aside. Rey was a character who didn't demand anything and didn't call herself a better version of her male counterpart Luke, but she also implied that she didn't need him to be a teacher to her.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
This line is interesting because it suggests that Rey doesn't need instruction at all, but someone to put her in the best position to be her true self. She implies that she has a seat at the table already, and that she just needs to be shown that table. While this line is not outrightly prideful, it does imply a sense of entitlement that is often overlooked. And that's how feminism began to get a hold in Hollywood, with lines of dialogue that don't look like much when said, but when broken down, hint at more feminist leanings. Rian Johnson all but admitted that his whole goal with this movie was to make OG Star Wars fans mad, and the dialogue was just one of the many ways in which he did that. Of course, the trend continued with projects like Batwoman, a show that was thankfully cancelled after 2 seasons that were the television equivalent of a colonoscopy given in a back alley in Gotham. Batwoman was probably the most egregious example of toxic feminism in TV up until that point. There was nothing subtle about it. Every word out of Kate Kane's mouth was self-aggrandizing, self-congratulatory, entitled, disdainful nonsense. Others compared her even to Bruce Wayne.
You're a female Bruce Wayne.
Awesome, hilarious, handsome.
Excuse me while I hurl. As if Kate Kane is worthy of standing in the same room as Batman, let alone taking up his mantle. In all actuality, this show was filled with so many omens that we could expect from the future of female characters in Hollywood that I wish we could be clairvoyant and somehow put a stop to this nonsense with our mouths and our wallets. Kate Kane was the forerunner of women taking credit for men's work, women acting entitled when they have done nothing to earn the mantles that they have stolen, and women demanding attention simply because they are women. Not only was the writing abhorrent and abysmal, The characters that were responsible for saying those lines didn't do themselves any favors at all. I can think of far too many characters who have fallen into the trap of stoicism and nonconformity to any sort of nuance in the last 10 years, and it has only become more and more egregious the longer that it has been allowed. Let's examine the language of some of the women from ages past who were not only well written, but they were women that anyone could admire and aspire towards while still having power and the ability to wield it in large amounts. Galadriel, for example, the good one, not the psychopath from Rings of Power, is one character that I will always admire. Every line that she speaks is poignant and worth reflecting on. She truly understands that each person has their own journey to embark on and does her best to provide encouragement, comfort, and peace during trying times. She doesn't attempt to shoehorn her way into the Fellowship, recognizing that all have their journey to play, and her encouragement displays this very well. Contrast this with psychopath Galadriel's words to her troops when they are exhausted in the north looking for traces of Sauron.
We should never have come in here.
We leave soon enough. The order is given. We march at first light.
Also, take notice of the fact that this Galadriel is not called Lady. You can draw your own conclusions from this subtle bit of language, but the new Galadriel is called Commander, a title that denotes a rank of power. The term lady used in that context denotes nobility, a woman of grace and bearing and regality. Psychopath Galadriel is none of those things, so the best they can do is to remove her femininity and replace it with expressions of dominance, because power is the only truth that modern feminists know. Contrast this knowledge with this scene from the Fellowship of the Ring, when Lady Galadriel is offered all the power in the world and goes through a great deal of temptation before choosing to give it up.
In place of a dark lord, you would have a queen! Not dark, but beautiful and terrible as the dawn! Treacherous as the sea!
See, what Lady Galadriel and the audience understand, and what psychopath Galadriel and modern feminism do not, is that power is corrosive and often leads to despair and destruction. The entire concept of Lord of the Rings, while being an epic story of good versus evil, is about the corruptive nature of the ring, and by extension, the corruptive nature of power. The ring whispers in the ear of its bearer about all the things it can do for its wearer, all the secret wishes and innermost desires that it will provide if it is just used. As it turns out, psychopath Galadriel does not need a ring because she gives into her most violent and carnal desires already. The words she uses, the anger she displays, her uncaring and uncompassionate nature make her another sad example of how Hollywood feminists have ruined what was once a remarkable character. You see, Hollywood feminism is obsessed with concepts of inequality and correcting what they perceive to be imbalances wherever they can. Even if a female character that was present in a major franchise like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, but did not play a significant role like the guys did, this is an imbalance of the highest proportions to them and needs to be corrected right away. Take
What do you think the fallout of Me Too has been now, approaching 10 years hence?
I often hear from men that they are now more reluctant to go up to a woman in a bar or whatever. That there's this problem of fear of being falsely accused of something. And so I think, I believe them, if some men are experiencing that. I'm sure though what's gone on is that the men who were already sexually aggressive and likely to actually be, Me Too perpetrators haven't changed their behavior at all. And the men who started being really careful, we're probably fine to begin with.
If you were a raper, the
People weren't
recent
listening.
social media campaign probably, well, they've got a hashtag on Twitter, I'd better stop going around raping.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I wrote about it in my first book, and it applies to this as to loads of things. The problem of normal distribution, where you have some trait which is arranged on a bell curve. And the problem is that if you apply some intervention, so whatever that is, like a social movement like Me Too or some policy change or whatever, probably what you want to do is you want to actually target one of the tails. You want to, you're like, oh, so we've got we've got a bell curve of sexual aggression, and there's this like most aggressive end who are causing no end of harm. What we want to do is make them stop. But it's you can't just apply an intervention to that point on the normal distribution. Like, it's going to shift in one way or another, and everyone is going to be affected.
You're smearing the entire group with the same solution.
So what you end up with is moving the threshold for being like reluctant to go up to a woman in a bar or whatever slightly, just to mean that like some of the nice guys are not doing it. Like, but that doesn't actually improve. It doesn't affect the rapists. And it doesn't improve women's experience of it.
David Buss's book, Bad Men, talks about it's one man doing 1,000 sexual assaults, not 1,000 men doing one sexual assault.
Yeah.
It's repeat offenders over and over and over and over again. And unfortunately as well, repeat victims. There is something about the way that, again, this isn't victim blaming, but it is like something about the way that women hold themselves, where they showed this to, I think, maybe criminals in prison or assaulters or men that had assaulted people, and showed them a number of women walking, and they asked them to pick which one they would attack if they were going to, and they converged on the same women. So, for all that we can say, it's not about wearing the skirt, it shouldn't be about being in the dark alley at the wrong time, all the rest of it, like, correct. But there is something about particular women that causes predators to see them as viable prey. Does that excuse it? No. Does that, is that them choosing it? Also no. But like, this is just the way that the world appears to be.
Yeah.
It's ruthless.
Yeah, and it drives me mad that we tell lies to girls all the time about this, because we're so desperate not to appear to be victim blaming, that we'll say, oh no, you can behave like a man, you can do whatever you want, go back to some random guy's house, it'll be fine. And then when it inevitably isn't fine, we're like, oh, well, he shouldn't have been sexually aggressive. I was like, yes, obviously, but we don't, I would love to just like delete every rapist from the world all at once. I can't do that. Like, if the advice that I'm going to be giving my daughters is going to be, unfortunately, different from the advice I'll give my sons.
What would be the advice that you'd give them?
It's like, for instance, don't go back to a random man's house that you've just met. Like, basic, okay? Like, consider it to be completely commonsensical up until even like the 1980s, This is like recent stuff, but basically unsayable now, in feminist circles at least. Except everyone quietly says it,
Well, again, it's the stated and revealed preferences thing. Like, how many parents that will proselytize about this on CNN and say that, we shouldn't be telling women, oh, so you're saying that we should just accept the fact that men are going to do this. It shouldn't be that women should change their actions, men should change their behavior. Okay, what did you tell your 17-year-old daughter to do last weekend? Did you say, make sure that you text me when you get home, make sure that you're home before 11, etc.?
Don't get an unlicensed taxi, whatever. Yeah.
Stated and revealed preferences.
Yeah. And what drives me bananas is that there are some girls who don't actually have parents or friends or whoever who are privately telling them the truth. All they hear is the public misdirection.
Oh, this is like the luxury beliefs of Me Too in a way.
Yeah. And so I feel as if actually we have a duty, people who are speaking publicly, to tell those girls the truth on the assumption that they're not going to hear it from anyone else.
It's the cultural surrogate mothers, in a way.
Yeah.
You've got this line between consensual and good, which I think relates to Me Too as well. What's that?
I think that a lot of there's a lot of things that came under the Me Too banner. Some of it was just unambiguously criminal, and, Harvey Weinstein or whatever got sent to prison for criminal acts. A lot of what came up, though, a lot of the stories that got shared were things that weren't actually strictly criminal. It was just like bad behavior. It was behavior that actually in another era you probably would have been called ungentlemanly or something like that. But that vocabulary isn't available to a sort of contemporary feminist who's really bought into the sex positive message. And so they'll tend to just talk about things being consensual or not consensual. And actually the consensual, not consensual bar is like a low one. It's a legal bar. It's not actually a moral bar, really. Like there are a lot of things that a man can do on a first date or whatever that are legal but are bad. Plenty. But we don't really have the vocabulary to describe them, which is why I try and make, like the feminist case for chivalry. We shouldn't have got rid of that as a concept. Like when you have this, as stark a physical difference and psychological differences between the sexes, 99% of men can kill 99% of women with their bare hands and not vice versa. We have to operate with that recognition. Chivalry in those circumstances is obviously in women's interests, even if occasionally it will mean feeling slightly patronized. Like who cares? I'm so happy to have the door held open for me and my bags carried. It's completely fine.
If it means that someone